Roseanne, you want to get things started?
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Roseanne Singer, one of the editors at Passenger, an independent press based in Baltimore and dedicated to the work of writers over 50. Our mission is to lift up the voices of those who are writing in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and even 100s. We want to provide opportunities for older writers to publish, read their work, find new audiences, community, and to inspire. And on that subject of community, next month, Passenger will be launching 2 local workshop series, one in poetry, one in memoir. And there's still time to enter our annual poetry contest with a deadline of April 15th. You can learn more about everything Passenger does and offers at our website, which you'll find linked in the chat. I want to thank the Maryland State Arts Council, the Community of Literary Magazines and Presses, and the Baltimore County Commission on Arts and Sciences for their support, as well as all our individual donors. And special thanks to all the writers who are here today and those who've supported us over the years. Today, we're celebrating our 2026 winter issue, our 80th issue, with its stunning cover featuring a painting by New York artist Harriet Livanthinos. We always have a quote at the beginning of the issue, and this one by Bill Van Buskirk may resonate with some of the writers gathered. Here's what he wrote. This is my ambition, to find a language that can reach down into those depths and begin a long, slow dialogue with what is found there. A language that embraces frantic emotion, blurred image, fleeting thought, and embodied inkling. So sit back and relax. We expect the reading to last about an hour, followed by a conversation. We hope you'll stick around for that. And throughout the reading, we welcome your active participation in the chat. We encourage you to respond to the work you hear. We would also love if everyone here would post where you're joining us from. And without further delay, I'd like to introduce our first reader, Hanya Qtub.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank the executive directors and the editors of Passenger for this amazing and generous opportunity to participate in this reading. Hello, my name is Hanya Qtub, and I wrote this poem in response to my distress at watching the violence directed at my people in the last 2 years. It has reopened traumatic memories of violence that I witnessed many times as a child. I feel that the only power left for us as a people remains our words, if others will hear them. I'd like to think that as we grow older and the passions of youth wane, that the world too would calm down and be a better place. To see cruelty has been especially difficult, especially when it's directed at the most vulnerable. My poem is entitled, You Ask Me. You ask me to read my poem, and I say, I can't. For to read to you has certain rules. There's an etiquette that we agreed upon, that my words, full of furious feelings, will be delivered politely, without crying, without convulsing or collapsing or contorting my face as I try to avoid both. To do that requires a space between my words and myself, a space that does not exist, a space that cannot exist. because separation from my words is loss. And I have loss. I'm standing in the tempest of loss of my land and my people, of my past and my present. Its inferno clutches me. And there is no space. There are only words. Thank you. Next, I would like to introduce our next reader, Wendy Taylor Carlisle.
Wendy, we need you to unmute.
Hi, I'm coming to you from the Ozark Mountains. This is a poem that began over a decade ago when my mother was dying, and she said something very strange, and I put it aside because grief is hard. It's hard to write about. And finally, this happened not all that long ago. This poem has an epigraph from Forrest Gander. Anthropologists say that every human culture ever studied has developed burial rituals or some special way of dealing with the dead. This is burial customs. Every culture has to deal with its dead, anthropologists say. Once you were dead, I had you burned up, then lost your ashes. But as everyone also says, you aren't dead until the last person alive who had a long Christmas vacation, being careful not to upset you, has followed you to perdition. Dear trouble, dear burr under the sad saddle blanket, dear first tick of summer, I long ago forgave you, but not so long as you held the opinion that I would never be nice. We had our rituals for avoiding the hard talk about our shared and long dead kindred. Meanwhile, I kept failing to kill myself. You kept pursuing gracious living. Neither of us succeeded. One of the last things you assured me was that you meant to live forever. I wish you had, or long enough for me to learn to love you in that special way. Of course, you didn't. And the next reader is Richard Jacobs.
Hello. In my story, Dandelions, a middle-aged man takes his father for an outing one Saturday morning in April. It doesn't turn out the way the son expects it to. I'm going to read starting at a point a couple of pages into the story, just after both men are belted in the son's car. My father had been the most physically robust man I'd known. He was still strong at 73, despite the failed knee replacement surgery and therapy he'd endured and the chronic pain inhabiting his lower half. His inability to finish the house repairs that used to be so simple for him to undertake was shameful to him. In his business, he'd been fearless on ladders, roofs, and steeples. He'd had his falls and broken bones, and though few and far apart in years, these had taken a toll on both his body and his conception of himself. He cursed the dandelions this morning for their assault on his pride. All his married life, he kept his lawn lush and weedless from early spring through late November. I'd offered to mow the lawn for him twice this month, but he'd insisted that he get to it. The last time he cut the grass, this past October, my mother had watched his slow progress and mounting frustration through the kitchen window, afraid he'd fall and injure his person and his dignity further. As to the vicissitudes of his physical condition, Dad had yet to choose the peace of resignation. The trade show is at the old county riding club, right? I asked as we set out. Yep, 12 miles away. 15 miles, I thought, but didn't say. I did say, Marie and Ned are planning to visit Mom later this morning, my wife and son. That's good. We rode on in what I decided to regard as our established companionable hush. I'd become used to my father's thoroughgoing silences. It wasn't until I'd been a term or two at college and had heard horror stories about other students' parents that I saw how my father's love for my sister and me and all his family lived reassuringly in his eyes and his deeds and within his inlaid virtues. Love, he believed, didn't need to be spoken. His own childhood home, our mother had pointedly divulged to Missy and me, had been beleaguered by an array of misfortunes and griefs. Loving words, promises, consolation, all were voiced within those walls in the sparse diction of reticence. Dad had learned early in his life that words must be used with care. This was a lesson I had not always heeded in his presence. Though I loved him with the same heightened force with which I loved Marie and our children, I'd made mistakes. Some years before, when Dad was still hale, I'd offered to pay him for the materials he'd bought to replace the floorboards on my front porch. I'd known he wouldn't let me pay for his labor, but the boards had been expensive. His face turned rueful. 10 seconds passed before he said, "Why do you always have to ruin it?" Ruin? I'd felt ungrateful for not offering to compensate him, then for failing to recognize his desire to express his love for my family in his own way once again. A few miles from the riding club, Dad looked over at me and said, "You and Marie have a good marriage, don't you?" What? Oh, yes, we're very happy together. He returned his eyes to the road ahead. I've always believed so. Flustered, I decided not to inquire about the motivation for this question, to risk another blunder. Our next speaker is Lohi Pohila.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you to Passager. This poem is part of a collection that concerns intergenerational trauma from war. It is centered around the experiences of my grandparents and parents, who, along with over 400,000 other civilians, suffered from the Russian invasion into Finnish Karelia during World War II and were forced to evacuate from their homeland twice. It also explores the immigrant experience post-war and the challenges faced by my family linguistically, psychologically, and culturally. The current president of Finland, President Stubb, recently said, "War is a failure of humanity." Isoäitini Nelly kertoi minulle, että koivu ja mäntymetsä oli hänen kirkonsa, paikka, josta hän löysi rauhan vaikeina aikoina. Tämä runo on isoäiti Nellylle. Kiitoksia, rakas mummo. My grandmother Nellie told me that the forest of birch and pine was her church, the place where she found peace in difficult times. This poem, I hope, expresses her spirit and fortitude and her love of the natural world. Olen hiljainen metsän henki. I am a quiet forest spirit. The spiders have rolled up their warping boards and folded their looms in the waning autumn light. I peer at them from behind freckled granite boulders as squirrels heave acorns and swans alight on the glass-cold lake. Birch girls and frost boys tiptoe over to tuck in scores of 8-legs for the long pause under leaf ash blankets. Others parachute away on silken threads. I look for magic, first in the brain of a white squirrel, then in the mouth of a white swan, to save the endling earwarts and felt lichens. But none is to be found, even though the cuckoo breaks the gloom of winter's silence and fertilizes the earth with its songs. The earwarts and felt lichens will disappear, their moment short as a blousy cloud's flutter across the sky. At the first puff of warmth, the spiders will heave their looms across their shoulders, unfurl their warping boards, and begin their tapestries anew above the empty, moist pockets where once thrived such modest lives. Thank you. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Michael Salzman.
Thank you so much. I was born in Pilsen, Czechoslovakia, in 1946, right after the war. My parents survived, almost nobody else in the family, reaching out to many cousins, survived during the war. And we came to the United States in 48, and then 2 years later, I had polio. And so between those stresses, there developed within me ideas and positions that I thought were unique and were given to a scientific background. The poem has very short lines, and in just a year or two, I went to this pattern that almost looks like one of those Texas kind of lines that come down in just bare threads. So this is the poem. Someday I will be your ancestor, and nothing for me will change. I will be gone, and you will be listening, or not, to the silence I make with these words, or by serving as an example in your own life. Just remember your luck in having a grandfather I never had because of the Shoah and did not know their names. Cover all the angles of he who loves you from the grave. Read where his course was deft and what was doomed to loss. We can never live the life of the other. Only love can cross the gap. Like a fire in a synapse of the brain, where the gap is very small and the chemicals chilling. Our next reader is Christopher Stewart.
Thank you. My piece was inspired by a dry spring and summer here in central Illinois. We're very connected to agriculture here, so droughts are serious business. The piece attempts to capture how the reflection of the external environment can mirror our internal lives, revealing lingering loss and the healing that may follow. Drought. That summer's drought began in spring. Sugar magnolias surrendered their blossoms early, stillborn, papery petals tumbling in macabre pirouettes to worn sidewalks in the struggling light of March. By June, the ground had baked to a leaden gray. Bishop's weed scratched through the brittle loam, and irrigation brooms were rolled out like hospital machines over wheezing corn rows south of the city. The heat misted our eyes with sweat, and lingering grievances gathered in the shapes of surrendered years. We fought over our bodies' refusal of fire, the distance between us like a parched creek bed in a charred wood. We argued over barren recollections of medical rooms, still shadows in ultrasounds, the rasping fear of growing old together, alone. Nothing was spared until the rains returned in September. It will be a quiet, colorless fall, a salve to soothe the burning season, settle the dry brush of memory. Our next reader is Ruth Mota.
Hello. Hello.
We can hear you, Ruth. Whenever you're ready.
Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Christopher, that was beautiful. Thank you. And hello to everyone. I'm speaking to you from Santa Cruz, California, where we know drought too. Related to my poem, a while ago, my husband fell and he bled in 4 parts of his brain. He's a polyglot and is fluent in 6 languages. And still today, we play our Scrabble game every day using words we know from any language. But his doctor warned me that the severity of his dementia from this fall might be masked by his verbal skills. So that's kind of the origin of my poem called Put Away. There's a woman in our poetry group who throws out German words like sticks into the sea. I found Sehnsucht washed up on the beach today, a word that translates to the Portuguese saudade, means more than longing. Rilke says it is to dwell in waves with no home in time. After half a century of marriage, my husband landed there. All day long he calls me darling, so I asked he say my name. Confusion swam across his face. He shook his head. Ruth, I said. He brightened. Are there 2 Ruths then? I guess the one beside him now and the one he put away. These Ruths the same, I told him, though I doubted too that that was true. And our next reader will not be a reader. She's the artist of the beautiful cover of this volume of book, Harriet Livanthinos. Thank you.
Harriet, you can unmute yourself. You're
Hello.
good.
Got me? Okay. Thank you. That was just beautiful. Um, I I have to say that I was just thrilled to receive my copy of the Winter Passenger Journal, and I was honored to have my upside down world painting chosen for its cover. As a matter of fact, I think it looks even better with the Passenger logo emblazoned on it. So thank you for a great job of presenting it. I appreciate it. And my congratulations to all of you talented writers. I really appreciated reading your deeply felt work. About me, briefly, I was born in Texas and am currently living and working in Kingston, New York. I received my MA in painting and printmaking at Wayne State University in Detroit. I studied figure drawing at the Art Students League in New York and abstraction at the Woodstock School of Art. I've been juried into the National Association of Women Artists. I've had solo and group shows in Greece, Texas, and New York, and have several works included in the collection of the United States Embassy in Athens, Greece. Until my introduction to abstraction at the Woodstock School of Art, I always drew or painted what I observed. Moving from realism to abstraction, using line, color, texture, and form as a language, is my way of telling a story without words and showing how something feels as opposed to how it looks. Since 2018, I've been painting responses to the turbulent political climate of recent years. This piece, Upside Down World, refers to the puzzling and profoundly upsetting realization that our allies are now presented as enemies and our enemies as allies, and that our help can no longer be counted on. The shapes are kind of landscapey familiar, the colors warm and friendly, the textures switching from vague to prickly, but the composition turns it all upside down. Perhaps reflecting a difficult past we may have started to forget. The painting is drawn with graphite and painted with ink and watercolors on a waxed canvas. Thank you. And I'm very happy to present our next reader, Marjorie Seddon.
Hi, I'm Marjorie, and thank you all for giving me the opportunity to read with so many talented poets. My poem is called She Hears. Recently, I was worried about losing my hearing. I thought about all the things I could hear and that I couldn't hear. That was the inception of the poem. Then I started to think about things that had happened to my husband, like falling off the bed and breaking his hip, and his terrible lung disease where he struggles to breathe. That led me to think about my parents' death and how I feel I can still hear them, the way I can hear the stars at night. She Hears is about what speaks to me. She hears, this is the poem. She hears him whisper in her ear, a violin string trembling. She hears him talking to himself, thinking she's not listening. She hears him fall off the bed onto the vinyl floor. She hears the sunrise in the morning, the rustling of the trees. She hears the night arriving with all the stars. She hears her dead parents calling her to dinner. She hears him moan in his sleep. She hears her own voice, a muffled cry. She hears him breathe, the wind struggling for air. So the next poet I'm going to introduce is Lori Nisley.
Lori, if you could please unmute. You had it for a second there.
We're good now? Thank you. I do want to take just a second to just say how thankful I am to be here and to be part of a group of artists that is so talented and generous. So I want to share a very brief poem with you today. It's called Black Lab, and it's actually from a true moment shortly after my father died. And the word I think of when I think of my relationship with him is messy. And it was a lot to deal with, both before and after he died. And then a few days after he died, we had this little puppy show up, which you'll be hearing about in just a second. But the reason it's so short is because I think of it almost as like a snapshot, and how it is those little things when you are you're going through it that can help you to see your grief as something outside of yourself that you can visit. And I would not say by any means that it allowed me to resolve things with my father, but it did allow me to miss my dad. So I was very grateful for that. And the poem is called Black Lab. A few days after you died, a black Labrador puppy showed up at our door, long legs and big toes like a Queen Anne's table. Despite the collar and the clean coat that spoke of another home, he refused to leave, greeted each of us as we approached, then settled again to wait us out. I joked to my brother that this was your new incarnation, your brown eyes and black hair reborn, consigned to four-legged humility. It stuck in my ribs afterward, that surreal second when I imagined you back, loyal at last, all patience and devotion on my front step. Okay, thank you. And I would like to introduce our next poet, which is Peter Greg Slater.
Lap 24 is a story about a workout on an indoor track at a health club, a worst case scenario. I will read excerpts from the first pages, skip the middle, leaving it to your imagination, and cut to the ending. Dr. V.T. Shah, chief of surgery, bent over my bed in an ICU. A miracle, Elliot, that you're still ticking. The doctor, not one to mince words, cheerfully informed me. Most men of 76 who underwent this degree of blunt trauma, lacerations, broken bones, concussion, would have gone into cardiac arrest. How I wound up in this sorry state is a long story. There'll be plenty of time ahead without much to do to think about it. I used to run 3 to 4 times a week. The Doom workout at Club Spartan took place only 72 hours ago, but in another life. The indoor track, 12 laps to the mile, is on the 3rd level of the club's atrium, circling the perimeter, high above the ground floor with the usual assortment of workout apparatus. Guardrails protect against falls. The club's membership can be divided into 3 types. Those who are there mainly to socialize, those who are there to both socialize and work out, those who are there only to work out. I was in the last category. I chit-chatted with no one. I was all business. Some would say obsessively so. The fateful Tuesday happened to be my birthday. In the evening, I might get a celebratory call from my daughter in Albuquerque, a 50-50 chance since we weren't currently on the best of terms. To mark this special day, I intend to run my fastest 2-mile of the year, beating the previous time of 20 minutes. Given my age, a 10-minute per mile pace is more than passable. Paraphrasing Dr. Johnson's oft-quoted remark about the stunt of a dog walking on its hind legs, it's not that my old guy running was done well, it was that it was done at all. I initially had the track to myself, which was glorious, a closed world filled with the pleasing illusion of moving swiftly through space, the relentless seconds rolling by in the Garmin smartwatch, and the rhythmic sounds of my footfall. I just returned to my hospital room after a physical therapy session when Dr. Shah entered. You're recovering quicker than projected, Elliot, probably because you were so well conditioned. A 76-year-old with a resting pulse of 48 is not often seen. I'll never get back to that. Dr. Shah sighed. No, but it does have a residual long-term benefit. Going forward, you will do what you can do. But promise me, no more road rage. He patted my good shoulder and continued. When released, I don't think you'll be confined to a wheelchair, although a walker will always be needed. I never ran again, but I don't need to use a walker. Instead, I have become a walker with a limp. I forswore competing with the other walkers at Club Spartan, despite being sorely tempted at times. I also try my best to be one of the good citizen walkers, sticking to the designated inside lane. Nevertheless, now and then I find myself in a middle lane or runner's lane. The straying is partly the result of the limp, which on a bad day can throw my stride out of alignment. It is even more the result of not wanting to get too close to the guardrails. When I drift out of line, most runners dart around me, but some shout to clear out of their way, which I do with alacrity. Under my breath, I curse their receding backs. Our next reader is Deborah Core.
Thank you, Peter. Great reading. I'm very happy to be with you coming from Seattle, where it's still morning. In introduction to this poem, I want to say that I never thought I looked a lot like my mother until I grew older. And one morning, standing in front of the mirror, I got the inspiration for this poem. You wipe the mist from the mirror, and there stands your mother. Time is a steamroller, but not one that will smooth your surface. Her oldness was so incompatible with the urgent pace of your youth. Did you think you could leave her behind? Did you mourn her? Or just try to close her empty spaces? Now, you're as old as her last breath on this mirror. There's time in your hand to cradle her cheek. Thank you. And now I'd like to welcome in Nancy Pace Klein.
We inherited our old globe from my father-in-law, an enthusiastic traveler. When the equator became unglued and disconnected, it seemed to be making a striking judgment on our Earth today. The old illuminated globe. The old yellowed globe is losing its equator. Half has come unglued and hangs down, no longer in contact with the Earth. A World Series model, the artwork shows delicate detail, swirls and curlicues. There is an eagle with outspread wings above the Pacific Ocean, flying high between the Hawaiian Islands and Alaska, and here, a turquoise compass rose in the middle of the North Atlantic Sea. You can trace the bumpy mountain ranges with your fingertips, the Andes, Sierras, the range between India and Tibet. The legend is down by the Tropic of Capricorn. Elevations, populations, scale, and disputed borders indicated by a thin red line. Unfortunately, it does not mark the migration path of whales or the flyway of hummingbirds. The artist has left out active volcanoes and the shimmer zone where you might view the northern lights. I straddled the equator once in Uganda. I can't remember which hemisphere my heart was in. Our final reader before Q&A is Wes Carrington.
Thanks, Nancy, and what a beautiful poem. I know that globe well. And also thrilled to appear in the issue with the wonderful artwork and the name Upside Down World, because I feel like I've been living in that world for a few years. I'm a retired Foreign Service officer, served in the for the U.S. Information Agency and the Department of State for 28 years, still living in the Washington, D.C. area. My last overseas assignment was in Kabul, Afghanistan, back in 2014, 2015. And then during the pandemic, after I retired, I took some poetry workshops and returned to an early first love of mine. And this poem was in response to a prompt to write a poem that pivots from literal grounding to a universal concept. It's called Crab Legs and Cobble. Friday nights at the dining hall, after our only day off, they'd sometimes serve crab legs, limit 3 bundles per person, flown in from who knows where, maybe Alaska. Then back to work on Saturday, rejoined by Afghan staff on Sunday, and in the evening I'd go to chapel to briefly hold hands with someone and feel the warmth of the living as we said prayers for the dead. And I am the concluding reader. We will now turn it back over to Roseanne.
Thank you, Wes. And thank you, readers. I just loved the care and time you took with each of your pieces. We could really take them in. We'll be heading into the conversation portion of our reading, and you can post questions in the chat. While you're thinking and typing, I'd like to invite our staff to introduce themselves. We'll start with Mary.
Mary, unmute.
Mary, you're still muted.
Okay, now?
Great.
Okay. Yeah, I was so moved by these readings. I can't tell you. I'm uh, uh, I've been an editor of Passager since the beginning, and I just am so thrilled by the beauty and depth and the obvious meaningful. I don't know. I'm I'm not usually speechless, but it was a wonderful reading, and thank you so much.
Asher.
Hello, everyone, and thank you again for coming to our reading. My name is Asher, and I'm the managing editor of Passager, and I'm also a student in the MFA program in Creative Writing and Publishing Arts at the University of Baltimore. So if anyone picks up a lovely copy of our edition 80, if you haven't gotten so yet, I will be happy to mail it to you. Thank you again for coming.
And John?
Hi, I'm John Shore. I produce Passager's weekly podcast, Burning Bright. If you aren't on the list for that, you should be. You get it on the website, or you can sign up and Roseanne or someone will send you a reminder every week. I sweep the floors, do whatever is necessary. Spending most of the day baking for the reception, which will follow today's reading.
And let's hear from interns. First, we have Stevie.
Hi, I'm Stevie. I'm an intern. I do a little bit of work on the podcast with John, and I'm a student at American University studying journalism and environmental science.
Great, thank you. And how about Martha?
Hi, I'm also an intern doing some work with the podcast as well with John. I'm a junior at NYU and I'm studying French with minors in Spanish and art history.
Well, thank you. And now Christine, our executive director.
Well, now that you've already introduced me, Roseanne, my name is Christine. I am Passager's executive director and designer, as John said. We all wear a lot of hats here. this is the conversation part of our reading, a chance for you to ask the writers any questions that might have come up while you were listening. So please type your questions into the chat and I will direct them. Writers, feel free to ask questions of each other. I am going to switch our video to gallery view in just a moment so that those of you in the audience can see all of us together. But I will get us started with a first question. This is a question for anyone. Given the seriousness of the pieces you all shared today, I'm curious, how has your writing or your writing process changed through your seasons of life? Do you turn to writing in the same way during times of joy as you do in hardship? Anyone can unmute and jump in.
One of the first publications I had when I began to write again at the age of 50 was taken by Passenger for the contest. It was a poem about the first kiss I ever had. And I think I'm a better crafts person, but I don't think that the poems I write now are any deeper than that one was. And I've always uh, I've always appreciated Passenger and never so much as having this opportunity to read with everybody. So thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Lori, I saw you responded in the chat, but do you want to say something on camera? Just need you to unmute.
That's twice you got me. Yeah, I thank you for asking. My poems are almost entirely autobiographical. I have pretty much lived and worked in or around Baltimore my entire life. So I don't have the opportunity to write about my travels. But I do, without even trying, I tend to visit the same places over and over again. And it makes me aware of how those places have evolved over time. And it's really nice to revisit them and see that.
Thank you. Still waiting for some questions from the audience, but did anyone else want to answer that first question? Marjorie?
Yes, I've written all my life, and for many years I wrote about my family and love and death and all of that, which I still do. But my sister made a comment, why don't you write about other things? So more recently, I've been writing about things like Jocasta, Oedipus's wife and mother, and some things about my childhood, and some things about different things like, just life itself and the end of life and that kind of thing. So I've changed.
Yeah. Wes?
Yeah, I've found myself writing more about my parents than I thought I would at this stage in my life. When I was in high school or college, like I would not have written or thought of writing a poem about my parents. It was all about stuff, filled stuff and love and things like that. But when I returned to it later, I could see a lot more of their life stories and their wisdom and the reflections it had in my life. And so I guess I've written far less about foreign affairs than I thought I would be. This poem I read today was sort of the exception, and far more about my mother and father. So that's the change.
Wes, if you don't mind my asking, are your parents still with us?
My mom is, and I was just down helping her celebrate her 92nd birthday last Tuesday. My dad passed away about 5 years ago, but yeah, and I do read her all the poems that I write about her these days, and so she's she's my number one fan and critic.
Nice. We have another question in the chat. How much formal training or craft work have you studied? This question is for anyone.
Can I take a try?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I haven't formally studied creative writing. I was an English major for a while in college before switching to another major. But I'm a longtime member of a workshop that meets once a month and is extremely meticulous workshop in that the work is sent out a couple of weeks in advance so people can read it a few times before the actual workshop, and then the critiques are given both orally and in writing. So this poem indeed was this short story rather, Lap 24, was workshopped there a few years ago, and I never send anything out, no matter how finished I think it is, till it's workshopped, and there's always some comments that warrant changes as a result. So, I don't know if any other people are in a workshop, but if you can find one, it really is beneficial to your work. Plus, reading the work of other writers makes you more attuned to what's good and not so good in your own work.
Deborah, you wanted to respond to that? Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Yes, just to um, follow up on what Peter said, um, I belong to about four uh, poetry groups where we read each other's work, and I'm so deeply appreciative of their support through all of this. I didn't major in any kind of writing when I was in college, but I call myself a workshop junkie, because I take classes all the time, and I've learned so much from many teachers and from the groups that I'm in and from um, reading other poets. That's a big part of what I do. Thank you.
Deborah, how often do your groups disagree? Do you submit the same work among your four different groups?
Disagree? I'm sorry, would you clarify that?
I'm just curious if you submit maybe the same piece to your four different groups, and do you get the same sort of response, or do you sort of
Yeah. Often people will I'll send a poem to a group, and I'll get a certain kind of feedback on different parts of the poem, and then I'll revise it and send it to another group. But often people really hone in on what I already know is the part that needs the most work. So yeah.
Christine,
yes.
uh, I just wanted to bring to everybody's attention. I don't know what's happening with this organization, but Tom Lux, who was a wonderful, wonderful poet, and he formed a 1 week uh, experiment, which was at Sarah Lawrence until he left to be the chair at another place in the South. I had written poetry since age 16 and had terrible types of acceptances along the way. And I was about 50 years old when I spent 10 summers, only a week, from morning to night, 7 days. And you couldn't do anything except the poetry at Sarah Lawrence. And as soon as I got that done, about 8 or 9 of the 10 times, uh, things started happening for my poems and where they were found. Um, so I think people should know that it's never a dead end. You can find places that really love to treat people and to educate people. And that's what we had when we had Tom Lux.
That sounds really immersive.
Yeah.
Ooh, I have to say
Mm.
something because I had one of those workshops with Tom Lux, not at Sarah Lawrence, not under that aegis, but he was the best teacher. He was amazing because he was completely generous. He was never too busy to answer a question. It was amazing. So thanks for bringing him up, Michael. It was
my
great
pleasure.
man.
Well, we have another question from Diane in the chat. Would you describe when and what it was like to find your poet's voice? Question for the poets.
I think for me, it was more of a gradual process. It didn't happen overnight. It took a lot of experimentation. I don't know if the other poets in this group who are in groups, like Deborah is, 4 different groups, but I know from my own experience, I've been in a long-term group, and I know immediately, no matter what the subject is of the poem, I know which poet wrote it. They don't have to put their name on it. So it is their voice speaking through, no matter what the content is, I can hear their voice. I don't know if Deborah would agree with that, if that's been her experience or others. I could say it's very satisfying to find your voice finally and to feel comfortable with it. And I love that. And then for Colleen's question about writing in one or a few forms, I think maybe this is a characteristic of beginning poets, of trying to adhere to traditional forms or manageable forms, forms that we're familiar with or were taught in high school, for example. But I've noticed that many poets who have been writing for a long time are willing to break out of that. And it can be quite an interesting process to see that developing for a poet, different forms. And I'm finding I am doing that now myself quite a bit more. So thank you.
Thank you, Lohi. Did anyone else want to respond to Diane's question about your voice? Many of you have been writing for a long time. Maybe a comment about how it's changed. Go ahead, Wes.
I'll jump in. I was just thinking about maybe it's not so much a matter of finding the voice, but accepting it. Because looking back at the stuff I wrote when I was younger, I realize I'm still sort of writing that same way, but I'm finally comfortable with it now and embracing it. So, and while the forms may change, I find the voice sounds the same, if that makes sense. Like, I'm using some of the same words or phrases or ways of expressing things. So yeah, I guess it's just becoming comfortable with that voice that's always been there and didn't realize it at the time.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay.
I'd
Go
like
ahead.
to. I've been doing nothing in my life but write poetry for the last 32 years. And over time, my inner hillbilly has stepped to the fore. I can't tell that what my voice is, but my friends always know because it will sneak in there. We'll find a corn sheller, or you'll find "Thank You, Jesus," or some will be in there that is from my home. Also, all the other stuff. I I reference a lot of fairy tales and a lot of myth as well, but I do it like a hillbilly would. So there you are. I think that's probably my voice.
Thank you, Wendy. Um, we have another question. Well, actually, I'll go back to Colleen's question, which Lohi had answered, but maybe someone else wants to jump into. Do you tend to write in one or a few forms, or do you like to experiment with different forms? Probably a question directed at our poets. Go ahead, Christopher.
I write across a broad spectrum. What you heard was a short story, but I've also published poetry, flash fiction, satire, parody, and I have out there not yet accepted some short memoir pieces. So I find it uh, revitalizing to try different forms. I think I'm maybe better than some than others, but I don't just stick to fiction.
And I'll jump in on that too, because actually I do a lot of essay writing as well, memoir. And I often find that within my essays, there's a poem, and within my poems are what I want to write about in my essays. And a few times I have even literally like taken a poem and taken out the line breaks and see it as a paragraph and put it right in the essay.
That's a really interesting observation about your process. Um, Marjorie, you wanted to add something to that?
Yeah, I've taken a lot of workshops myself, and one of them was a poetry form workshop. And I found the most challenging and the most wonderful form is the ghazal, the Persian ghazal. So if anybody wants to give it a try, it's definitely worth your while.
Christopher, did you have something you wanted to add earlier?
Sure. I find myself going back to traditional form as kind of a form of exercise occasionally, to and sort of to attempt to sort of fit thoughts into to sort of be free by the. I mean, I'm certainly I'm not going to say my sestinas or my sonnets or my triolets are any good per se, but it's a way that I try to sort of return to an economy of words, and it ends up making my work in free form and free verse. I think it informs it and improves it in some ways.
Interesting. So even the additional challenge of fitting it into a form
Yeah,
loosens up your free verse.
it exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Anyone else want to jump in a conversation about forms before we go to the next question? Okay. Make sure I don't miss anybody. Does anyone have writers or poets that you turn to for inspiration? So who are you reading for your writing? Go ahead, Christopher.
Oh, I have a list. I like that question. I like I like accessible poetry that has uh, somewhat of a narrative bent, um, uh, um, in addition to its lyrical qualities. So who I'm reading right now is Ada Limon, who's the last book, the recently the poet laureate of the United States. Another poet that I really enjoy for the storytelling is Ellen Bass, um, and Rodney Jones and B.H. Fairchild and Yusuf Komunyakaa. and Mark Doty. That's my list.
That's a long list. Anyone else? Go ahead, Deborah. Oh, but unmute.
I'll endorse Ellen Bass. I read her all the time. She's also a wonderful teacher. And Jane Hirschfield. And now I just pulled a blank on the rest of them, but those are two major ones for me. Ada Limon as well. Yeah. Oh, Mark Doty. I agree with that one too. Thank you.
Go ahead, Marjorie.
My favorite all-time poet is Louise Gluck.
Favorite of mine as well. Anyone else for the long list? Favorite writers? Okay. We have a question from Bill about creative process. Do you write daily? Do you take breaks for weeks or months at times? So how does your process ebb and flow?
Could I say something there?
Yeah, go ahead, Richard.
I find that you have to, or at least I have to have a routine. And so I try to write, well, I'm retired, so, I got plenty of time, but I try to write at the same time of day every day. I write prose, not poetry. And I just find that it's much easier to keep writing if I have a routine.
Go ahead, Wes.
Yeah, I need deadlines. I'm a procrastinator, so even routines don't help me if I don't have that deadline to force me. So the workshop I'm in now, it's every 2 weeks, and so I've got that time to produce the next work that I'm going to share, and that keeps me on track. And so I really benefit from deadlines. And just a word on inspiration too. I don't have any one particular poet I follow or like. I like a lot of them, but I do like inspiration from like daily poems in my inbox, whether you sign up to Rattle or Only Poems or whatever, but having that to start off my day. And then whenever I'm driving somewhere, I like the Poetry Unbound podcast. It's just such a nice deep dive into particular poems, and I'm always discovering someone new that way. So that's my inspiration.
Uh, I might spend days without writing, but never weeks. It's like an addiction. I need my fix. Uh, Plus, when a story or poem is really going well, it grabs you. You just can't let go of it, and it kind of uh, writes itself. Uh, but the important thing is, I spend as much time revising or more than I do in the initial draft. And it's one of the things that some of the newer people, younger people in the workshop don't understand. Uh, Revise, revise, revise. My writing hero, F. Scott Fitzgerald, was revising The Great Gatsby in galleys and page proof. So revision is just as important as what you're first turning out.
I actually, in terms of how long you'll go without writing, I would say from the time I was a small child through college, like I wrote all the time. And then I kind of ran into the wrong guy and I did not write for 30 years. And what amazed me was that when I did, maybe about 5 years ago, I kind of went back and, looked at some of those things and looked at who I was before that happened. It was amazing to me that my writing was still there and to realize that it had been with me the whole time. And on some level, I had been writing that entire time. And it's now that I have the opportunity to put it on paper. And, like Peter was just saying, to revise it and to, if you think of the word revision, that's what it is, right? You're looking at it all again, and you're seeing the things that you didn't realize were there, or didn't realize, oh, that's my point. That's what I want them to see. That's how I want them to hear it.
I was going to ask for someone to confess if they had taken longer stretches between writing. But Lori, I'm glad that you found it again.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think that's a pretty common story
Yeah.
among passenger writers. Just you spend your lifetime chasing other things.
Yeah.
And now you have this breadth of time.
Right.
Yeah. There is a question specifically for Richard. How close to your father is the character in your story?
Well, my father did have a lot. He was in construction for his work. He suffered several falls and he had injuries, and he had trouble walking toward the end of his life. So I took those situations and, well, I put him in the story, but it wasn't really in his real life. He didn't bury an engagement ring or anything like that, like this guy does in the story. But I just put my father in a situation he'd never really been in. It's kind of a way to, think about him. Or
Thank you. Carolyn in the audience has a hand raised, but we're not going to be able to hear you. Can you possibly type your question into the chat? And then I can read it out loud. Do any of you have questions for each other?
May I follow up on something from a little bit earlier? When you were talking about the poets that you read and that have influenced you, the oldest one you talked about was Louise Glick. And I think she was born in the early to mid 1940s. What about all those other poets that came before the 1940s in this country and in England and other countries? Were they not as important to you? Why do you connect with more current poets?
Well,
Well,
I'm aware
oh, I'm
of
sorry. Go ahead.
Rilke is my favorite poet, and T.S. Eliot. I love some of the old writers, and some of the old writers seem too difficult for me, but I love like couplets within a larger piece of work.
I love so many different kinds of poets, particularly foreign poets. Like Chinese, I studied Chinese poetry for a long time. And even the anonymous poems by Chinese really sometimes just blow me away. They're so beautiful. So, but I always think of people that I'm influenced by as being more contemporaries.
Shelley Ozymandias, Tennyson in Memoriam, Auden, La Musée des Beaux-Arts, and September 1st, 1939, Philip Larkin, This Would Be the Verse.
I think when people ask me about my favorite poets, I always go to, to the ones that I'm currently reading. But I remember being in college and an actor came through and read from Whitman. And that's when I knew I loved poetry because of that performance. So and of course we read Emily Dickinson. Oh, those things that really made me feel like there was so much life within poetry.
Yeah, I certainly would also have to give a shout out to Whitman. Just that voice and that inclusiveness and that honesty and vulnerability. And even though the voice is strong, like the things he's open to made him very vulnerable. And you can't have courage or you can't have strength, I don't think, unless you are willing to be vulnerable. So that is something I have always greatly admired. And, across the spectrum of writers, that they open themselves up and they share it. I think that's remarkable.
There's actually a question about that vulnerability from Beth, who says, I have been writing on my own, sharing a poem once in a while with a close friend or family member. My poems are often very personal. I struggle with fear about sharing with strangers, but also I have a longing for my poems to have a wider life. Do any of you have suggestions as to how to deal with this?
I mean, I think I would say, just to start, I don't have specific advice, but it was hard for me to trust it at first. But, throughout life and dealing with other writers, I found that they want to be generous and they want to hear you and they want to help you when you ask for their advice. And, there's two kinds of people, right? There's the people that if they are at a party and someone is near them, they don't even really notice. And there are other people that if they are in the circle conversing, they just sort of instinctively widen the circle and bring you in. And as scary as it is to start, I have found more often than not that writers are people who expand their circle.
How did you make that first step from sort of privacy of writing to be more public?
It got more and more personal as I went through college and as I went through workshops and seeing that vulnerability in other writers. And I have a friend, he actually lives in Singapore now, but in college he was almost like my writing partner. And we still pass things back and forth, and it really is, I see that in his writing, and it almost makes me feel like, how could I not offer my vulnerability back to writers that are willing to do that?
Sounds like I want to be a part of your writing group. Sounds very friendly.
Well, I need a new writing group. So anytime, drop me an email.
Yeah.
And to the person who posted the question as well.
Kind. Anyone else have advice for a writer? Go ahead, Marjorie.
Yeah, I think one of the ways that helps me a lot with my writing even is to just free write. Just write and write and write and write and write and then go back to it and try and extricate the things that you think sound good. And then take that and make a poem out of it or whatever. But it's all process. You have to start with things that maybe don't even make sense or whatever you've written, but then go back to it and find the things that will make a poem.
All right, a question from Carolyn. I don't think of myself as a poet, but in middle age I was very unhappy and angry and found an outlet in writing poems. When I look back at them, I think they're very well done. Only now in old age am I returning to writing poems, and they're mainly thoughts on life in general, comments on life. Does anyone else connect to that?
I'm thinking. I mean, on some level, isn't that's what all writing is, right? Is, you know, that I don't want to say slice of life. That's not the phrase I mean. But those reflections on life and your take on it. Like, I think there is the level in which we are all writers. We are all poets. But there's only some of us that write it down and share it and recognize that self, that part of ourselves.
Deborah, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the part of the question that had to do with looking back at something written in the past. I think sometimes when we're writing, there's this inner critic that's just got a stranglehold on you sometimes that says, this isn't very good, put this aside. My experience has been that sometimes when I look back at old things that I wrote, I think, oh my goodness, that's not so bad. That's actually pretty good. And I surprised myself because I put it aside and said, ah, that's awful. But I think we have to get more accepting of just what we're able to write and not and let more in instead of just saying, oh, it's not good.
It's good that you go back. I feel like I put something away and I don't want to look at it again. It's that fear um, of what it's going to be, but you're saying it's not so bad. So, yeah.
Look
Good.
again.
Yeah. Question from Paul. What is it like at family holidays? Do they all know you write? Do they appreciate your work? How do your families respond? Marjorie, you said your sister asked you to.
Yeah,
What's up writing
my
about
sister
family?
doesn't want to see my poetry until it's completely published or whatever. But I do share my poetry with my husband, and he's my greatest critic.
Mm-hmm.
And I also share it with people in the workshop. So they're my family as well. But I don't have much family left, so I don't have many people to share it with in my family.
Mm-hmm. Anya?
Yes, thank you. I do share my work with friends and family, and although they are not really interested in poetry itself, um, we are interested in people hearing from Palestinians. I feel, and many Palestinians feel like their voices have not been heard. Um, Journalists are not allowed to film what's happening to us. And every time there's negotiations politically, we're not involved. Everyone negotiates on our behalf. No one really is permitted to speak. And so poetry is a way of speaking, it's a voice. And I do think my family and my community does appreciate that. I don't consider myself a poet, but really, maybe I would say someone who's reporting on what's happening. And I'll just say that a lot of people don't feel comfortable. If I came up to someone just to say, "Do you know what's happening? Can I tell you? Can I tell you about the fact that Gaza has the highest number of child amputees in the world?" And people are not comfortable if you just come up to them and say that. I've noticed, but in poetry, I can write about it.
Wow. Yeah. I'm just thinking about sometimes poetry just becomes the unpopular genre. Um but in your case, that's how you're finding your audience, that it supersedes other ways to.
Yeah, there's so many ways to try and be seen or heard. Yeah, I started writing in my 50s to cope because I felt like I couldn't speak, and I'm working and I'm expected at work to behave normally, but I'm traumatized. So I started writing to cope, and then I thought, well, maybe if I share it, at, at least those who maybe don't agree, but there are many people who don't have an opinion about it, and they may learn something new.
That's also the nature of art in general. You know, it's a way for people to express where they are, and a way for people to take that in beyond just the the day's newspaper, whether it's writing or music or visual art or film or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, John. I mean, isn't the objective of each and every one of us to be seen or to be heard? And I wanted to tell you, you have a really nice reading voice.
Thank you.
I mean, that's why Passenger exists.
It's amazing.
I am sorry to bring this to a close, but that's going to be all the questions that we have time for. Roseanne, I'm going to hand it back over for her to wrap things up. Mary, did you want to say something? You'll have to unmute though.
Okay, yeah. I just want to say, because I got all tongue-tied before, but yeah, as a poet myself, and I've been writing poems since I was a little kid, I just got so much out of the things that you said in this conversation. So much that I could relate to, and so much that gave me new ways to look at things. And so I'm grateful for all of you being so open and willing to talk to us this way. So thank you again for your readings and afterwards.
And thank you, everyone in the audience, for not only coming, but participating and interacting with us. I think I can speak for everyone that that connection means the world to the readers, and to all of us at Passenger. And thank you.